Well, our first guest this evening, it really needs no introduction from me now, though once upon a time he did, and he's never forgotten that fact. We helped to make Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, the Professor of English Literature and Orientalism from the University of Tehran, a thing in the Western media. Now they can't get enough of them until he leaves them bleeding, metaphorically, on the floor of their Western mouthpiece television channels. He is the heavyweight champion of the world, Professor Syed Marandi. Welcome back, always, to the mother of all talk shows, fresh from your triumphs against Sky and the BBC, which I think cancelled your broadcast, having seen you in the ring against Sky. It's undoubtedly true, is it not, that the empire already knows that the empire, as in the form of Iran, is well able to strike back and is striking back again right at this moment. Your thoughts, please.
Well, first I have to point out that you are the person who I have looked to throughout all these years, and I still think that you are far better than I and far more eloquent than I will ever be in your defense of the oppressed and the deprived. But I thank you very much for your kind words. Yes, indeed, I think that the tide has turned. The Israeli regime and the American regime, they thought that through deception, they could undermine Iran through terrorism. American AI companies right now are helping the Israeli regime target people in Tehran. To be very blunt, I've been asked to get rid of my cell phone, but I can't because that's how I work with the media. And so I'm facing a dilemma because I can no longer stay with my family or stay at my apartment building because I don't want to risk people in that building, because the Israeli regime, when they target someone, they target the entire building, bring it down. Just a couple of nights ago, they killed 65 people in a single building, something that the West doesn't care about, Western media, Western regimes. And today, 10 children were murdered in another building, and the list goes on. So this is how the United States and the collective West work together to help this genocidal regime carry out death and destruction, whether in Gaza, whether in Beirut, or whether in Tehran. We saw the so-called Minister of Defense, or the Minister of Genocide, say yesterday that he's going to burn Tehran. Well, he failed. But we also saw him before want to burn Gaza and burn Beirut. What is wrong with these monsters that they want to burn everyone? But in any case, the tide has turned. And while these are bitter days, the Iranians, no doubt, are going to overcome. And the Islamic Republic of Iran will continue to support the Palestinian cause and to continue sacrificing for the Palestinian children who are being starved as we speak. And we should never forget them. Even as the missiles are striking Israel, or as the Israeli regime is assassinating people in Iran, we should not forget that children are starving in Gaza. Families are being massacred on a daily basis in Gaza. But Iran will continue to struggle. It will overcome. There is no option but to defeat the Israeli regime, to make the regime regret that it attacked Iran. And we are seeing, despite the entire West supporting the Israeli regime, trying to block Iranian missiles, despite the fact that bases in Qatar and the Emirates and Bahrain and in Turkey and in Iraq are being used to help the regime, both offensively and defensively. And while the airspace of Iraq and Syria and Jordan are being used by these regimes to help this genocidal monster Netanyahu and his allies, we see that Iran is hammering the regime, Iran is punishing the regime, and this will continue and it will intensify until the regime is forced to kneel.
The terrorist threat that you alluded to there is such levels that they're now exploding car bombs on the streets of Tehran, the method of operation of gangsters. They have agents. I see that a lot of Indian agents have been rounded up, accused of acting for Israel. They have a fifth column in Albania, which they paid for all these decades, which they say has now been sent back into Iran, though many of them have never been in Iran for 40 years. I don't know if they'll know their way around anymore, but they are seeking to destroy the Islamic Republic. The king in exile is on the sofas of American television. This is existential for you now, isn't it?
Yes, without a doubt. And they are using ISIS and Al-Qaeda elements in Iran to carry out these assassinations, to help them murder people. So ISIS and Al-Qaeda has been a tool not just in Syria or Iraq or in Libya or in Afghanistan, but also very much so in Iran. And as I said, American AI companies, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, all of these are being used together, and high-tech US companies, to help the Israeli regime carry out murder and slaughter. But again, as I said, I have no option. Either I have to discontinue doing interviews and I have to get rid of my cell phone as they've advised. That's not possible for me because I'd be silenced. Or I have to keep my cell phone and leave the family so that at least they are safe and my neighbors are safe and my neighborhood is safe. So this is the dilemma that many people in Iran, I assume, are facing. And this is all being carried out with the help of American citizens, American armed forces, European armed forces, European companies. All of them are working together against Iran. And you see that regional companies are either with them. No one is with the resistance. Let's be very clear. Except for Iran and Yemen, no government in this region is pro-resistance. All the others, it's just show. They're doing trade and business. There are groups that are opposed to the regime. There are people that are opposed to Zionism and ethno-supremacism. But the regimes, they're all in bed with the Israelis, and they are either actively helping them or they are allowing the Americans to use their territory to help the Israeli regime. And they did that with Yemen as well when the Americans carried out that short-lived war against the people of the brave and courageous people of Yemen.
There may be no governments in the region, but there are other governments. The Russian government has a close relationship with Iran. China also. The BRICS countries, with one or two exceptions. To what extent is the regime change operation being mounted against Iran a part of the war against the BRICS?
I think it is a part of that. But I also think that the Israeli regime is something very special to these supremacists. The United States, the elites, and the European elites are captured by Zionists and neocons. And we see that as we speak, they are sacrificing Ukraine for these Zionists. They're taking away the air defenses of Ukraine for this Zionist, for this ethno-supremacist, racist, and genocidal regime. And they have destroyed Ukraine. They have used it as a tool for many years, but 3 or so years, it's been devastating to Ukraine. And after all the sacrifices that Ukraine made, and after being destroyed and wrecked, they just dump it and take their toys elsewhere, their tools elsewhere to support this ethno-supremacist genocidal regime. And I think that's a lesson that not only that should teach the Ukrainians not to trust the West, but it should teach the rest of the world that the West doesn't care about anyone. They'll use you and then they'll throw you away when they have other priorities. But the collective West is doing everything that it can to help this regime. When the regime bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, France, Germany, Britain supported the bombing of the embassy. And now that they're bombing Iran, again, these European companies are supporting aggression. They're supporting attacks on nuclear installations, where if there is leakage, many people could die, but they support it nevertheless. Why? Because they don't care about us. We are all Amalek, George. We are all subhuman to these people. In fact, the reason why the Minister of Defense of the Israeli regime can say, I'm going to burn Tehran, I'm going to burn Beirut, or the Dahiya doctrine, or they speak about mowing the lawn in Gaza or burning Gaza. The reason why they can say this, and no one says anything about it in the West, is because it is acceptable for them. It is okay for them to do that because we are inferior beings. That's just the state. That is the reality. So the liberals in the United States and in Europe, they speak about 1,001 genders. But when it comes to genocide and ethnic cleansing and the Holocaust in Gaza, they're fine with it. Men can go, they will defend the right of men to play in women's sports, but they will not defend the children of Tehran who were slaughtered over the past few days. They will not defend the children in Lebanon who were slaughtered simply because Hezbollah was trying to draw forces away from Gaza to protect Gazan children. They will not do anything to support the children of Gaza because we are all Amalek, because we are inferior. When there's a chosen people, that means the rest of us are not worth much.
The president of Israel, Herzog, who posed at the beginning of the genocidal attack on Gaza, signing bombs with a grin for the camera, is considerably more sad today as he talks about bombing residential areas. How piquant is it to discover that Israel's command and control center is literally underneath a hospital? How piquant is it that the Iron Dome missiles are actually being fired by Israel from narrow residential streets, using their own people as human shields? Irony of ironies, surely.
Yes, but that is, for us, it is outrageous that the Western media will say nothing about it. They'll keep quiet. But when Netanyahu, for nearly 40 years, has been saying that Iran is on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon, Iran is weeks away, months away, a year or two away from developing a nuclear weapon, the Western media will not tell people that he's been lying for 4 decades. Every time he makes a new claim, he'll say the Israeli regime sees it as I say regime, that the Israel sees it as Iran as an existential threat. They won't tell people that this is just the lie that they've been using all along, Western governments, the Israeli regime, Western think tanks. And they won't tell people that the facilities that they bombed that are linked to the nuclear program, all of these buildings that they bombed or are attempting to bomb, or these underground facilities which they can't have access to, all of them are regularly visited. IAEA inspectors visit these buildings, and they have never said that Iran has moved to develop a nuclear weapon. The board of governors of the IAEA is a political body, and it is dominated by the West. Whenever they are nearing a deal with Iran, they'll behave better. Whenever they want to put pressure on Iran, they'll rehash old accusations. So the political body and the head of the organization, which is under Western control, like all international bodies that were created post-World War II, they will say what the United States wants them to say. But none of the technical experts have ever said that Iran is moving towards a nuclear weapon. But this is not something that Western media will say. Just like we've seen over the last couple of nights, CNN and other outlets speaking about the children in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, where just a short distance away, they're starving 1 million children. They are starving 1 million children. the hypocrisy of these journalists, the hypocrisy of these governments, the hypocrisy of these NGOs, these human rights NGOs, the hypocrisy of the whole Western political establishment is mind-boggling. But it's something that we have to get used to. And Iran is going to resist. Iran will not allow them to overcome. Iran will not allow the Israeli regime to succeed. And hopefully, even though Trump has been hypocritical and he's been deceitful and he's been a part of this aggression, hopefully he will not get involved directly, because that will lead to a global catastrophe. That will lead to the destruction of these Arab family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf that host US bases. So the smart thing to do for Trump is to distance himself, and in fact to put pressure on his allies, his genocidal allies, to be careful, because this could lead to a catastrophe where the entire world is affected in a way that would be far worse than 1929 and the 1930s. But in any case, whether the United States gets directly involved or not, Iran is going to punish the Israeli regime. And the Israeli regime is going to pay a price. Iran will force the regime to regret what it did. And ultimately, I believe this is what is going to lead to the fall of Netanyahu. Even though it's not going to change the regime, because the fall of Netanyahu is like Nazi Germany without Hitler. It's like ISIS with Abu Bakr Baghdadi. It's like Al-Qaeda where Jolani becomes Shara al-Shara. There's no difference. But I think that Netanyahu has gone too far, and he has effectively destroyed the Israeli regime, because the Israeli regime will have to face humiliation. They have shown that despite the entire West supporting it, they are completely vulnerable to one country, and that is the Islamic Republic of Iran. And the Islamic Republic of Iran will not relinquish the Palestinian people. It will not forsake the Palestinian people, and it will continue to support them until they're treated as equal human beings, and until you have equal rights for all people in Palestine. Something that in the West is outrageous. Human equality in the West is outrageous, and that is why we're so evil in their eyes. But that is a day that is approaching, God willing.
Let's suppose that this punishment that Iran is delivering every evening continues for 5 nights, maybe for 10 nights, maybe for more. If Trump picks up the phone and says, look, I think this has gone far enough, let's return to the status quo ante, meet me in Oman a week next Tuesday. What would the Iranian response be, do you think?
I don't think it's going to be like before. The situation has changed, and the Iranians will have new demands. The equation has changed, George. You know this because you've lived through it. You know it better than I. The Israeli regime has never been humiliated like this before. Every night they're vulnerable, despite the fact that the entire NATO apparatus is there, and they've given up the air defenses of Ukraine and left them to be attacked in order to protect their ethno-supremacist genocidal monsters. Despite all that, they are being humiliated every night, and today they were humiliated during the day as well. This will continue. Iran will push this to a point where the regime recognizes that this was a catastrophic mistake. And I think that is already happening. We are already seeing messages coming to Tehran from the French president, the Emir of Qatar, who is in their camp, whose air base is being used by the Americans to help the Israeli regime. And also, the Americans are sending multiple messages to Iran that we are not a part of this, we had nothing to do with it. Whereas the Iranians have evidence that and it is clear that they were involved. And even Trump's statements on the first day indicate clearly that the United States was involved. But the more recent post of Trump seems to indicate that things are not going as well as planned. And that despite the initial shock that they hope to impose on Iran and cause some sort of collapse, that has not happened. And that shows the strength of Iran, that despite the collective West supporting this act of aggression, that Iran, within hours, was able to regroup and now is going to gradually turn the tide. They are carrying out assassinations in Tehran and elsewhere using drones. They are being supported by the West and Western intelligence agencies. In fact, the methods that are being used against Iran are identical to the methods used to strike the strategic bombers in Russia. The same people who organized and worked to bring about that operation were involved in preparing for these days in Tehran. And I think that is very telling.
Now, you don't make these decisions any more than you make any of these political and military decisions. You are an academic, albeit an extremely persuasive one, which is why they might try to kill you. But it seems to me that the case I've been making, and which you have contested several times, that Iran, like North Korea, is a country that simply must arm itself to the extent of its technological and scientific capability. Otherwise, it can forever fall victim to these kind of sneak attacks. The Israelis do not declare that they are thinking of using a nuclear bomb, but they have them and they could use them. But you are, as a matter of policy, political, theological policy, have set yourselves against the acquisition of nuclear weapons. Do you think that calculus might have changed at all as a result of this week?
It is changing the mood in Iran, there's no doubt. And ironically, George, Trump has done more than anyone else to push Iran closer to a nuclear weapon. It's Trump's doing. The Iranians have always disliked weapons of mass destruction. You know the history. During the war, when the West gave Saddam Hussein chemical weapons, I survived 2 chemical attacks, both mustard gas and a nerve agent. Others didn't, and others are still dying as we speak, a very slow and painful death after decades. Iranian politicians and military officials went to Ayatollah Khomeini, Imam Khomeini, and asked permission to produce chemical weapons. And he said no. He said, this is a horrible weapon. And they didn't do it. And afterwards, the current leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, said the same. So that is a moral issue and an ideological issue. But the problem is, there's also another problem, and that is that if you build a nuclear weapon, then you encourage other countries to follow suit and also to build nuclear weapons. And we have neighbors, Central Asia, the Caucasus, West Asia, and this could create a much more dangerous environment. So the preference is not to have a weapon. However, when the United States is threatening Iran with destruction, when the Israeli regime is threatening Iran with destruction, when you see a racist, apartheid, genocidal regime that has the full support of the West, that has no red lines, it has no red lines, because we're Amalek. We are worthless to them. We are worthless people, and the West is fine with that. That is why they allow them to starve Gaza. They help them starve Gaza. They're doing it together. They're helping to destroy and bomb Gaza. You see British intelligence involved. You see European nations. None of them will sanction the Israeli regime because they're in bed with these genocidal maniacs. So when there are no red lines, the argument among many in Iran is that for survival, we have to move in that direction. So they're tilting the balance of power, or the balance, let's say the balance of in the argument, or the power of one argument over another. They're tilting that balance. They're tilting the debate. in one direction. So Trump himself, through duplicity, through dishonesty, through brutality, through supporting death and destruction, through murdering Iranian children, and through threatening Iran, and through the airstrikes by the Israeli regime against Iranian citizens, Iranian civilians, and the Iranian nuclear program, they are pushing Iran in that direction. And ultimately, if it becomes an existential threat, then Iran's nuclear posture will change. And this would be something that I think would be very unfortunate, but I believe would be necessary.
Well, I know I speak for all of our audience who value you so highly, that we pray for your safety and urge you to find another way of keeping in touch with the media. Change your phone number, do whatever is necessary, because there's not two Professor Muhammad Marandis.